Second, the joint reproductive incapacity of a same-sex couple must not be addressed through reproductive technologies. I believe that a child has a right not to be created from the genetic patrimony of two men or two women, or by cloning, or from multiple genetic parents. Therefore, same-sex relationships should not be included within an institution that symbolizes an inherently procreative relationship. Third, bringing children into a same-sex relationship should not be seen as within the norm, but rather as an exception of it. Although it is considered a radical view by some people, and often seen as politically incorrect, I believe that a child needs a mother and a father and, if possible, and unless there are good reasons to the contrary, preferably its own biological mother and father as its raising parents. Adopted children search for their birth parents, and current moves to give children born through reproductive technologies, using donated gametes, access to the gametes donor's identity, show a deep human need to know our biological family origins. Recognizing same-sex marriage would make bringing children into a same-sex relationship part of the norm, rather than the exception. We should recognize same-sex relationships and legally protect them and any children involved, but not by recognizing the same-sex couple's relationship as marriage. Finally, within the context of the legal issues related to recognizing same-sex marriage, we must ask what the private international law impact of changing the law would be on all Canadian marriages, not just same-sex ones. 7. Social experimentation. It is relevant to consider the rules governing experimentation in deciding whether to redefine marriage to include same-sex couples. The rules governing any experimentation are especially stringent when vulnerable populations, that is, children, and those unable to consent for themselves, that is, children, are involved. The burden of proof is on those wanting to conduct the experiment to show that it is reasonably safe to do so. In comparison, if we structure the claim to same-sex marriage as a right not to be discriminated against, then the person allegedly discriminating has the burden of proof to show that their actions are justified. Burdens of proof are not neutral in terms of the outcome of decision-making. In cases of equal doubt as to which decision should be taken, the burden of proof will favor the person who does not carry it. That is, the person with the burden of proof will lose his or her claim. Consequently, how the question of whether to include same-sex couples in marriage is structured is not neutral with respect to the decision outcome. Number 8. Discrimination. Homosexuals are not excluded from marriage, but their intimate pair bonding relationships are. It is argued that is discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation. If that is correct, we must consider whether the discrimination is justified. I believe it is. One way the justification can be articulated is in terms of the doctrine of double effect. The primary intent in restricting marriage to opposite-sex couples is to maintain marriage as the institution that fulfills society's need to protect the inherently procreative relationship and its function for society, and is not to exclude homosexual relationships because they are homosexual. The discrimination involved in the exclusion is a secondary effect, which is not desired but unavoidable, and it is justified or excused by the primary purpose which otherwise cannot be realized. A useful comparison can be made with the discrimination involved in affirmative action. That shows that sometimes discrimination and the harm it involves can be justified when it is to achieve a greater good that cannot otherwise be achieved. It is also argued by those advocating same-sex marriage that excluding same-sex couples from marriage is the same act of discrimination as prohibiting interracial marriage, which has rightly been recognized as a serious breach of human rights. That argument is not correct, because an interracial marriage between a man and a woman does symbolize the procreative relationship. Its prohibition is based on racial discrimination, which is wrong. In contrast, not extending the definition of marriage to include same-sex couples is not based on the sexual orientation of the partners, but the absence of a feature of the relationship which is an essential feature of marriage. Conclusion. In conclusion, society needs marriage to establish cultural meaning, symbolism, and moral values around the inherently procreative relationship between a man and a woman, and thereby protect that relationship and the children who result from it. That is more necessary than in the past, when alternatives to sexual reproduction were not available. Redefining marriage to include same-sex couples would affect its cultural meaning and function and, in doing so, damage its ability and thereby society's capacity to protect the inherently procreative relationship and the children who result from it, whether those children's future sexual orientation proves to be homosexual or heterosexual. I just thought that was an amazing piece, and please go read it, share it with others. I think this is something that everybody needs to read.